We are dealing with the end of the world that we know. Russia is more of a symptom of this than a cause.
This really is the end of the world.
The end of the world we understand, yeah. We're going back to something that's a lot more similar to the world as it existed in the early 1900s. The closest would be the Black Plague. But the Chinese are going to lose a greater percentage of their population in the next 20 years than Europe did during the Black Plague.
And you think by famine?
This assumes no famine. This is just aging.
Just aging.
Yeah, if you have an energy breakdown or a food breakdown, it happens a lot faster.
And they have energy issues and they have food issues.
They are the world's largest importer of energy, about 14 million barrels a day. Remember, we're a net exporter. And they are the world's largest importer of food and food inputs.
That's it?
That's as good as it's going to get, because there is no trade option out of this without the United States.
But how does China come through this, though?
They don't.
So what happens to them if they don't?
Well, I mean, this is one of the wild things and the hard parts of my job. It falls into famine. It falls into tyranny. You get hundreds of millions of people suffering from malnutrition and then ultimately dying. The coast goes one way. The interior kind of breaks off and shatters. And then the cities of the coast in the south, your Shanghai, your Fujian, your Guangzhou, your Hong Kong, they basically become independent city-states and integrate with foreign powers primarily in order to get food. With the Russians having their problems, the Russian space is the world's largest single supplier of fertilizer of all types. So we are already knee-deep in a fertilizer crisis globally. The Chinese are the last in line for all of this stuff. 90% of the calories they produce are dependent upon a foreign support system. In the United States, it's less than 10. We produce most of what we need locally, and most of the rest comes from Canada. But you interrupt the food supply chain in any meaningful way, and China is only one of a host of countries that has some very real problems. Now, China faces the biggest one in absolute terms because of the size of their population. Second, I will say there are 7 different variants circulating in Beijing right now, or in China right now. 3 of them did not exist 2 or 3 months ago. And it takes about 6 months of data for you to get good information on the R0 and the lethality. So we just don't know.
They're in the middle of the worst aspect of the pandemic for them ever.
Yeah. Now,
which is very strange for us because we're on the other end of it.
And if you have a food or an energy crisis, or God forbid, both at the same time, on top of a health crisis, on top of government incompetence, there is no way a central government holds together in that sort of environment. Is that they're going to lose 1.5 million people because there's no one to listen to anymore. That's one of the fun things about Russia versus China. And it's very difficult for the Xi administration to even run it because it's not an administration anymore. No one wants to bring Xi information on anything. We now have tech barricades that prevent the Chinese from buying the equipment, the tools, or the software that's necessary to make semiconductors. In fact, he went so far as to say any Americans working in the sector have to either quit or give up their American citizenship. Every single one of them either quit or was transferred abroad within 24 hours. So the tech system is stalled. They don't have the young people to go consumption-led. They're completely dependent on the U.S. Navy to access international trade. They are the most vulnerable country in the world right now. And based on how things go with Russia, we're looking at a significant amount of raw materials falling off the map, specifically food and energy. And the Chinese are the world's largest importer of both of those things. Without young people, we've seen their labor costs increase by a factor of 14 since the year 2000. So Mexican labor is now 1/3 the cost of Chinese labor. Their educational system focuses on memorization over skills. So despite $1 trillion of investment in a bottomless supply of intellectual property theft, they really haven't advanced technologically in the last 15 years. Mexican labor is probably about twice as skilled as Chinese labor now, even though it's 1/3 the cost. They've consolidated into an ethnic-based, paranoid, nationalistic cult of personality. Even if the Chinese were able to capture Taiwan without firing a shot, it doesn't solve anything for them. They're still food importers. They're still dependent upon the United States. They're still energy importers. And even if they take every single one of those semiconductor fab facilities intact, they don't know how to operate them because they can't operate their own. And their own are among the worst in the world, not the best. If you know that the economic situation is going to go to pot, then you have a couple of options. Option 1 is you try to cut a deal with a country that can help you out, but the only country that could do that is the United States. So, with that sort of environment and ocean moats, the United States is an economic power, whoever who is in charge. I mean, we've had decades of bipartisan effort to try to screw this up, and we haven't pulled it off yet. We're not going to do it under Biden. He doesn't have the energy.